The emergency beacon pulsed weakly in the perpetual twilight of Erebus. Valeria's four-fingered hand trembled as she adjusted its frequency for the 8th time in as many hours. The temperature in her damaged escape pod had dropped another 3 degrees since nightfall, and the insulation was failing. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," she whispered, her voice raspy from the toxic atmosphere she'd briefly inhaled during the crash. "This is Senior Botanist Valeria Thorne of the Sylvan Ecological Research Vessel Arborea. Coordinates attached. Life support critical. Please respond." She added the timestamp, 194 standard hours since the crash, and let her head fall back against the metal wall. The motion sent pain shooting through her body from the deep laceration across her torso. The medicinal paste she'd applied was losing effectiveness, its bioluminescent glow fading to a dull flicker. Outside, something large moved through the ice fields, its footfall sending tremors through the ground. The creatures of Erebus had been circling closer each night, drawn by the unfamiliar sense of her blood and the pods leaking fuel cells. Valeria's silver-blue skin had lost its healthy luster, taking on an ashen quality that reminded her of the ancient ones in her family's memorial grove. Her species wasn't built for cold. The delicate filaments lining her neck, respiratory assists that supplemented her lungs, had begun to stiffen, making each breath more laborious than the last. "They're not coming," she told the silent equipment, watching the transmission indicator blink in its solitary rhythm. The Arborea had likely continued its survey mission, assuming her dead after the unexpected gravitational disturbance had torn her research shuttle from its docking clamps. Standard protocol when a crew member was lost in unexplored space. Valeria reached for the survival pack, counting her remaining rations, 2 nutrient cylinders and half a container of purified water. Perhaps enough for 3 more days if she further reduced her already minimal consumption. She activated her data tablet, reviewing her final research notes with a scientist's detachment. If death was inevitable, at least her discoveries about Erebus's unique lichen species might someday be recovered. The thought provided little comfort as the wind howled outside, driving ice crystals against the pod's damaged hull. The beacon suddenly emitted a sharp tone that startled her, sending a fresh wave of pain through her injured side. Valeria stared at it in confusion. It wasn't a response signal, but some kind of interference pattern. She adjusted the controls, her movements slowed by cold and weakness. The interference grew stronger, and then, impossibly, a voice crackled through the static. Not the melodic tones of a Sylvan rescue team, but something rougher with unfamiliar phonetics. "Receiving your signal, Human Research Vessel Pathfinder, approximately 6 hours from your position. Maintain transmission." Valeria's breath caught in her throat. Humans. She had never encountered their kind personally, though they were known among her people as ambitious explorers with an unusual tolerance for harsh environments. Their appearance in Sylvan historical archives was relatively recent, a young species by galactic standards, but one that had expanded quickly beyond their home system. Could she trust them? Would they understand her biology enough to help? Did she have any choice? Another sound from outside, closer this time. Sharp claws scraped against the pod's exterior, testing for weaknesses. Valeria pulled herself upright, wincing, and keyed the transmitter again. "This is Valeria Thorne. I receive you, Pathfinder, human assistance." She paused, swallowing her pride and fear. "Would be greatly appreciated." As she sent the message, the emergency lights flickered and dimmed. The power core was failing faster than she'd calculated. Valeria wrapped her thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders and watched the beacon's pulsing light, her lifeline to the approaching human ship and her only hope for survival as Erebus's endless night pressed in around her. The storm howled with renewed fury as Cade Mercer guided his ship through Erebus's turbulent atmosphere. Ice particles hammered against the viewport, visibility reduced to mere meters despite the Pathfinder's advanced sensors. "Hold position at 20 meters, he commanded the ship's AI. "Run another thermal scan." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a faint heat signature amid the frozen wasteland below, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but undeniably artificial. "There you are," Cade murmured, adjusting his descent trajectory. He'd been mapping the outer reaches of this system when the distress signal had reached him, faint and fragmented but unmistakable. The voice had been strange, its cadence unlike any human language, yet the universal distress protocols were clear. Someone was dying down there. The Pathfinder touched down roughly, skidding slightly on the ice before stabilizing. Cade sealed his environmental suit, checked his medical kit, and cycled through the airlock into Erebus's bitter cold. Wind-driven ice crystals pelted his visor as he trudged toward the coordinates, his suit's heating elements working overtime. Through the swirling white, he spotted the angular shape of a crashed vessel, smaller than his ship and of unfamiliar design. "Hello," he called through his suit's external speakers, approaching cautiously. "I'm responding to your distress call." When no response came, he found what appeared to be an entry hatch and forced it open with his mechanical assist tools. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the fading glow of emergency lights, and something else, a strange bioluminescence that pulsed weakly from the far corner. What Cade saw there made him pause in wonder. Huddled beneath a silvery thermal blanket was clearly not a human. The being had humanoid features, but her skin was a pale silver blue, with delicate, feathery filaments along her neck that moved slightly with each shallow breath. Her eyes, when they opened at his approach, were large and entirely violet, without visible pupils. "I'm Cade Mercer," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "I picked up your distress signal." The alien woman regarded him with obvious caution, then spoke in halting standard English. "Valeria Thorne, Sylvan Ecological Research Division." Her voice weakened. "My people didn't come." "I'm here now," Cade replied, running his medical scanner over her. The readings were confusing. Her biology was similar enough to human to register vital signs, but different enough that the scanner kept flashing warning symbols. What was clear, however, was the critical wound across her torso and her dangerously low body temperature. "I need to move you to my ship," he explained, noting how the structure around them creaked ominously. "Can you walk?" Valeria attempted to stand, but collapsed almost immediately. Without hesitation, Cade lifted her, blanket and all, surprised by how light she felt despite being nearly his height. "Your thermal regulation," she whispered against his shoulder. "Remarkable." "Human evolutionary advantage," he replied, carefully navigating back to the airlock. "We're basically walking furnaces compared to most species." Once aboard the Pathfinder, Cade placed Valeria on the medical berth and adjusted the environmental controls to raise the cabin temperature. "Your wound needs treatment," he said, gesturing to the laceration. "I have medical supplies, but I'm not familiar with Sylvan physiology." Valeria's silver-tinged fingers weakly directed him to her own medical kit, retrieved from the crashed pod. "Follow my instructions," she managed. For the next hour, Cade worked under her guidance, applying regenerative compounds that seemed to merge with her skin, sealing the wound. The process was intimate by necessity, requiring him to touch her in ways that would normally demand far greater familiarity, yet there was only clinical focus between them, two strangers united by survival. As the medications took effect, color gradually returned to Valeria's skin, the silvery blue taking on a subtle iridescence. The filaments along her neck moved more freely, and her breathing eased. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "Most species would not risk themselves for an unknown alien." Cade smiled as he cleaned up the medical supplies. "Maybe humans are special that way, or maybe I'm just a terrible follower of protocols." Outside, the storm intensified, rocking the ship with powerful gusts. The Pathfinder's sensors registered temperatures dropping to lethal levels even for his well-equipped vessel. "Looks like we're grounded until this passes," he said, checking the weather projections. "At least a full-day cycle." Valeria's violet eyes met his. "Then it seems we have time to become less unknown to each other." Dawn broke over Erebus, if the slight brightening of the perpetual twilight could be called dawn. Cade stood at the viewport, surveying the aftermath of the storm. Vast ice formations had shifted overnight, creating new chasms and ridges across the landscape. The location of Valeria's crashed pod was now barely visible, half buried under fresh ice deposits. "Your world reminds me of ancient myths," Valeria said from behind him. She had recovered enough strength to stand, though she moved gingerly. "We have stories of frozen underworlds where lost souls wander eternally." Cade turned to find her wrapped in one of his thermal blankets, studying the navigational displays with evident curiosity. The overnight rest had improved her condition remarkably. Her silver-blue skin now shimmered with subtle iridescence, and the filaments along her neck undulated gently as she breathed. "This place isn't far off from that description," he replied. "The outpost is here," he pointed to a location on the holographic map, nearly 300 kilometers northwest. "That's our best chance for proper medical facilities for you and communications equipment to contact your people." Valeria nodded, her expression unreadable. "My people may not be searching. The research protocols are clear about losses during exploratory missions." "They just write you off," Cade couldn't hide his shock. "We are a practical species," she said without emotion, though Cade thought he detected something deeper in her violet eyes. "Resources expended searching for one are often deemed wasteful when they could preserve many." "Well, humans tend to be impractically stubborn about leaving people behind," Cade replied, beginning pre-flight checks. "Even alien botanists we've just met." For the first time, Valeria's face formed what he recognized as a smile, different from a human expression, with a subtle rippling of the filaments at her neck, but unmistakably warm. The Pathfinder lifted off smoothly, rising above the ice fields. But as they gained altitude, warning signals flashed across the console. "That's not good," Cade muttered, studying the readouts. "The storm damaged the primary engine cooling system. We can't maintain high-altitude flight for long distances." "Can it be repaired?" Valeria asked, leaning closer to examine the diagnostics. Her proximity brought an unfamiliar scent, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. "Not without parts we don't have," Cade replied. "We'll have to stay low and conserve power. That means a longer journey, following the terrain rather than going over it." He adjusted their course, bringing the ship down to skim just above the ice formations. "It'll take us at least 4 days at this rate, maybe longer if we encounter more weather." Valeria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why did you come for me? You had no obligation." Cade kept his eyes on the controls. "Does there need to be a reason beyond someone needed help?" "Among my kind, yes," she said. "All actions are weighed for collective benefit." "Maybe that's why I find you fascinating," Cade replied with a half-smile. "You're nothing like humans, yet somehow familiar." They flew in silence for hours, navigating through narrow valleys between towering ice formations. Occasionally, Valeria would point out unusual geological features or rare signs of the primitive life forms that somehow survived in this hostile environment. By midday, they reached the edge of what Cade's maps labeled as the Frost Spine Mountains, a range of jagged peaks that stretched across their path. "We'll need to find a pass," he said, scanning the terrain. "There, that canyon might work." As they maneuvered into the narrow passage, the ship's sensors suddenly blared warnings. Something was moving below them, multiple large heat signatures tracking their course. "What are those?" Cade asked, bringing the ship lower for a better view. Valeria's filaments flattened against her neck, a sign of alarm Cade was learning. Erebus stalkers, apex predators, they shouldn't be hunting in packs. On the ground below, Cade caught glimpses of pale, six-limbed creatures moving with surprising speed across the ice. They were keeping pace with the ship, their eyeless heads turned upward. "They're following us specifically," Valeria said, her voice tense. "This isn't normal behavior." Before Cade could respond, the ship shuddered violently. One of the creatures had launched itself from a ridge, smashing against the hull before falling back to the surface. "They're attacking the ship. That's impossible," Cade muttered, increasing power to the engines despite the warning lights. "No predator should recognize a spacecraft as prey." Valeria's expression grew troubled. "It's me they want, my biochemistry, they can sense it somehow." As if confirming her words, more of the creatures appeared ahead, gathering at a narrow point in the canyon where the ship would have to slow down. "Hold on," Cade warned, diverting power from life support to the weapon systems. "This ride is about to get uncomfortable." Night fell faster than expected as Cade guided the damaged Pathfinder into a narrow crevice between two massive ice formations. The ship's systems hummed in emergency conservation mode, barely maintaining heat in the cabin. "They're still out there," Valeria whispered, her violet eyes fixed on the sensor display showing multiple heat signatures circling their position. "I've never seen stalkers this persistent." Cade finished securing the makeshift repairs to the hull where one of the creatures had damaged it. "At least they can't reach us here." He wiped frost from his hands and joined her at the console. But we can't stay forever. We're burning through power reserves just keeping the cabin habitable. They had escaped the immediate pursuit by using the ship's mining lasers to collapse part of the ice canyon, but not before sustaining damage that further compromised their already failing systems. Now, hiding in this natural shelter, they faced difficult decisions. The outpost is still 180 kilometers away, Cade said, studying the map. At our current capacity, we might make it halfway before losing power completely. Valeria's filaments rippled thoughtfully, a motion Cade was beginning to find oddly captivating. There's another option, she pointed to a location on the map. These thermal vents. My initial survey indicated they might be powerful enough to recharge your ship's energy cells. That's a 15-kilometer detour through the heart of Stalker territory, Cade observed. Yes, on foot. Cade stared at her. You can't be serious. The Stalkers hunt by sensing ship emissions and my biochemistry at a distance, but close up, they track by vibration and heat differentials. Her fingers traced a path on the map. If we move carefully during the coldest part of the night cycle, wearing your environmental suits to mask our heat signatures, we might slip past them, Cade finished, understanding her logic. It's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than slowly freezing when your ship loses power, Valeria challenged. Cade met her gaze, struck by the intensity in those alien eyes. Over the past 2 days, he'd watched her transform from a dying stranger into a determined survivor whose analytical mind continually surprised him. We'll need to prepare carefully, he finally said, and stay extremely close to each other. They spent the next hours gathering supplies, emergency rations, portable heaters, and Cade's most advanced environmental suit for Valeria, modified to accommodate her different physiology. As they worked, their hands occasionally brushed, each contact sending an unexpected warmth through Cade that had nothing to do with temperature. Your species, he asked as they finalized preparations, do you have pair bonds, relationships like human marriages? Valeria paused, her filaments fluttering in what Cade had come to recognize as amusement. We have lifelong pair bonds, yes, though they're typically arranged for genetic optimization. After a moment, she added, are you asking from scientific curiosity or personal interest? Cade felt heat rise to his face. Scientific curiosity seems the safer answer right now. Her laughter was like wind chimes, delicate and musical. Humans are fascinating. You mask genuine questions with humor to avoid emotional vulnerability. And Sylvans don't. We simply ask directly, she replied, stepping closer until he could see the subtle patterns in her iridescent skin. When this journey began, I viewed you as my rescuer. Now I find myself drawn to your presence in ways I hadn't anticipated. The confession hung between them, transforming the small cabin into an even more intimate space. Cade found himself reaching out to touch one of the luminescent filaments at her neck. Valeria's breath caught at the contact. Those are very sensitive, she murmured, not pulling away. I'm sorry, he began, but she caught his hand. I didn't say it was unwelcome. What followed was a moment of connection that transcended their biological differences, her cooler skin against his warmth, her filaments responding to his touch with pulses of bioluminescence that cast soft blue light through the darkened cabin. Their kiss was hesitant at first, an exploration of unfamiliar territory, then deepened with surprising compatibility. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Cade whispered, I think we've just made scientific history. Valeria's filaments glowed brighter. Perhaps we should continue this research after we survive our journey. The moment was broken by a harsh alert from the ship's sensors. Outside, the stalkers were moving, gathering closer to the ship's position. They're becoming more aggressive, Valeria observed, reluctantly moving back to the console. We need to leave now while they're still spread out. Cade nodded, the warmth of their encounter giving way to focus on survival. They donned their environmental suits, checked each other's seals, and prepared to venture into Erebus's deadly night. At the airlock, Cade paused. Stay as close to me as possible if we get separated. We won't, Valeria interrupted firmly, her gloved hand finding his. I didn't survive 194 hours alone only to lose you now. The research outpost gleamed like a beacon against Erebus's eternal twilight. From their vantage point on the ridge, Cade and Valeria could see the cluster of domed structures and the communication array stretching skyward. safety just 2 kilometers away. We made it, Cade breathed, his voice ragged with exhaustion. The journey to the thermal vents had been even more harrowing than anticipated. Twice, they'd nearly been discovered by stalkers, forced to hide motionless for hours in crevices barely large enough for two. The modified environmental suit had protected Valeria from the cold, but couldn't fully contain her unique biochemical signature, which continued to draw predators. At the vents, they'd successfully collected enough energy to recharge the Pathfinder's critical systems. The return journey had been faster, but no less dangerous, culminating in a final confrontation with a massive stalker that had left Cade with a deep gash across his shoulder and Valeria with renewed determination to reach safety. Now, standing on the ridge with the outpost in sight, Valeria gently examined Cade's injury through the tear in his suit. "Your medical technology should be able to heal this," she said, concern evident in her voice, "though you'll likely have an impressive scar." Cade managed a smile despite the pain, something to remember our adventure by. Valeria's filaments rippled in that way he'd grown to cherish, as if either of us could forget. They made their way down the slope toward the outpost. As they approached, automated security systems activated, scanning them both. "Human life sign detected," announced a mechanical voice. "Unknown biological entity identified, security protocols engaged." "Override protocols," Cade commanded. "Authorization Mercer 7729 Echo. This is cartographer Cade Mercer returning with an allied researcher requiring medical assistance." After a tense moment, the outpost's entry portal slid open. "Welcome back, cartographer Mercer. Medical bay is being prepared." Inside, they were met by the outpost's small complement of research drones and an automated medical system that immediately began treating their injuries. The warm air and bright lights seemed almost overwhelming after days in Erebus's gloom. As a medical drone tended to his shoulder, Cade watched Valeria interact with the outpost systems, quickly adapting to the human interfaces. She'd proven remarkably resilient throughout their ordeal, her scientific mind constantly analyzing and adapting to new challenges. Yet there had also been moments of vulnerability, shared stories, gentle touches, and that kiss in the ship's cabin that had changed everything between them. Hours later, with both of them treated and rested, they stood in the communications center as Valeria finally made contact with her people. "This is Senior Botanist Valeria Thorne to Sylvan Command," she transmitted, her voice steady. "Reporting survival after research vessel crash on Erebus, currently at Human Research Outpost coordinates attached." The response came faster than expected. "Botanist Thorne, your survival is unexpected. A retrieval vessel can be dispatched in approximately 16 standard days." Cade watched emotions play across Valeria's features, relief at being acknowledged, yet something else he couldn't quite identify. "Acknowledged, Command," she responded formally. "Will await retrieval, Thorne out." When the transmission ended, Cade approached her. 16 days is a long wait, but the outpost has comfortable quarters and my mission here can be extended." Valeria turned to him, her violet eyes searching his face. 16 days for us to determine what this is between us." She gestured to the space between them. "If it's merely the result of survival bonding or something more lasting." "I already know my answer," Cade replied softly. "From the moment I found you in that pod, something changed in me. I've mapped dozens of worlds, but never found anything as fascinating as you. Cross-species relationships are unprecedented among my people," she said, though her filaments glowed with obvious emotion. "We would face challenges." "I'm a human who rescues stranded aliens and fights ice monsters," Cade grinned. "I like challenges." Valeria laughed, the sound filling the sterile outpost with warmth. "Then perhaps when my people arrive, I'll have a difficult decision to make." "Or an easy one," Cade suggested, drawing her close. "I was alone for 194 hours, Valeria whispered, her filaments gently brushing his cheek. "I never want to feel that kind of solitude again." Outside the viewport, Erebus's frozen landscape stretched endlessly under distant stars, the hostile world that had nearly claimed her life, yet ultimately led her to an unexpected connection across the boundaries of species and space. As Cade's lips met hers, Valeria knew that whatever path they chose together would be uncharted territory, a new horizon waiting to be explored.